the mind thinks it needs to solve all the problems all the way down the line, problem A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all the way to Z, and it imagines the chess moves necessary to do that. But you can't really know more than one or two steps down what's going to happen.
You're listening to Parenting with Impact, a podcast for parents like you, raising complex kids to become capable, independent adults, even in this complicated world. Each episode brings expert insights and real-life strategies to help you parent with confidence, calm, and clarity. Here are your hosts, Elaine and Diane.
Welcome back, everybody, to another conversation in the Parenting with Impact podcast. Diane and I have a special guest today that we're really excited about. Jeff Warren is here to talk with us about all things meditation and mindfulness. And so we're going to bring a really conscious presence to the space today. So Jeff, thank you for being here.
Happy to be here. Sometimes conscious, sometimes unconscious. I'll just put it out there. Yeah.
We're going to consciously bring whatever comes, and how that unfolds is just fine.
Well, and I'm always cracking up because when you say, oh, we have somebody who's into mindfulness and meditation, they always feel like, oh, wow, it's going to be this Zen kind of human that like transcends all things. And one of the things I love about you, Jeff, is just how human and honest and vulnerable and, just in it that you are.
Flawed and screwed up and neurotic and overwhelmed.
Trees on your shirt. So, there's balance.
Yeah.
So
I'm here to normalize that for everybody.
Beautiful.
Maybe back us up a little bit and tell us a little bit about how you got into doing what you're doing in the world.
Sure. Well, I'm very happy to be here, particularly because I am an overwhelmed parent of two young, complicated kiddos. So I've benefited from listening to what you two do. And I've read many books trying to understand my differently wired kid. So one of my kids is 5 and one is 3, and maybe we'll talk more about that later. But in terms of how I got to the world of meditation teaching, it was a very indirect route. Nothing I would have ever in a million years guessed that I would get into, because I was allergic to what I imagined it looked like to be a meditation or spiritual teacher before I knew anything about it. I was a writer, I was a journalist. I wrote for a radio show in Canada called The Current, which is a kind of marine current affairs show. And I had a specific focus on that show on sort of big ideas and science. And I was very interested in the kind of whole riddle of consciousness and all the latest neurobiology. I have a brother who's a neuroscientist. And so I wrote a book about kind of like subjective experience, like how consciousness changes over 24 hours, sleep and dreaming, and what is the underlying neurobiology. And for that book, I had a chapter on meditation. I felt like I needed to, because those were when I was going to these conferences on consciousness, the latest superstars. This is like 25 years ago. But a lot of the excitement at those conferences at that time were around this new generation of findings around mindfulness in the brain, and getting monks to come in and talk, festooned with electrodes and report on what was going on in their brain. So it was very exciting. If you're interested in consciousness, this was the cutting edge. So I thought, okay, I better go to one of these retreats myself and see what this is all about. And that was quite a while ago now, like I said, about 25 years or so. And the moment I got to that retreat, this was a retreat in Scotland of all places. But I thought I was going purely for intellectual reasons because I was curious about the modality. But then I got there, I kind of realized I'm a pretty screwed up, neurotic, anxious kind of person. And this journalism work is kind of feeding that. And after 7 days on retreat, I could really see, the basic truth of if you're able to disembed from your thoughts and what feels so urgent and gripping in your experience, you can find more space and more perspective. And guess what? Fewer thoughts, fewer problems. And that was just the beginning. It became a whole, path for me to try to understand what I was experiencing and what I was learning. And because I was a journalist, I kind of took notes and still never thinking I would teach it. But I had a particular teacher who really encouraged me at a certain point. He said, just because I have a facility for talking about it, why don't you just share it? And he had a very chilled out way of being, how he thought about that. And so I started a group in Toronto that was really not a vertical, no hierarchy. It was very much kind of a peer-to-peer. It was called the Consciousness Explorers Club. Let's get together. Let's try these practices out. Let's share what we're noticing and what's helpful and what's not helpful. And through that, it just sort of grew. And eventually, Dan Harris, this guy who wrote a book called 10% Happier, it was before he wrote it, he kind of found out about me and we became friends. And eventually, when he wrote this big book, he invited me to write his sequel. And then I got on the apps and Calm and Happier. And then it just kind of went out. And all of a sudden, here I am in this bizarre position of being a neurotic writer who's also a meditation teacher. And I love it. It's so fun for a million reasons. It's fun because it's incredible to be able to learn about people's unique inner experiences, which I just never get tired of. It's so varied and strange and magical and interesting. But also to be able to do it with the interest of helping and supporting people, it gives a kind of purpose to a lot of my own struggles. And I feel like it's a good use of my abilities in this lifetime thus far. And now that I'm a parent, I'm like, oh man, am I ever drawn on it? And realizing where the practice maybe is less supportive than it could be. You have to get real pretty fast when you're a parent. So that would be mine. High speed bio, maybe not high speed enough, but there you go.
I love it. It feels very, not just relatable, I think, but so I don't know if Diane shared with you when y'all spoke earlier, my background before becoming a coach was a yoga teacher.
Oh, cool.
Interesting. And for the same reason that I was this kind of neurotic, stressed out mom, and I wasn't coping well enough. And so I did this more intensive training. This is long before becoming a yoga teacher was kind of a hit, that thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'd studied with a guy named Desa Kachar, and I did this whole thing. When I found coaching, it felt to me like it was like the verbalization of yoga, because it was all about presence. And what I'm hearing you saying is that it's about, whatever variation of it, it's slowing down and becoming aware of what your brain is telling you and how it's engaging in the world.
Absolutely. And it's, you'll know if you did a yoga teacher training, it gets very profound. I mean, actually, yoga is my first before I ever started meditating, I did yoga for many years, and that kind of introduced me, you could say, into this space. But this idea of being present, being in presence, it's not only is it the essence of co-regulation and what every parent needs to kind of at least, the horizon line to move towards as a parent, is it being present with your kids really will regulate them. The more genuinely present you are in your life, the more you begin to see that being present itself it's hard to say this any other way. It's almost like it's on a continuum, that there's being present and then there's being more present and then there's being more present, and that you can always drop your awareness down to include another subtle layer of experience until you could say, in a way, you're no longer taken by surprise by anything upwelling internally or externally. And that presence expands to include, a feeling of intimacy with a kind of spiritual feelings, I suppose, which I just see I see very much I don't think you need an esoteric lens to understand it. I see it very much as being the nature of real embodiment. It has that spiritual component to it, a sense of being connected to your life, your body, the world around you. And that's just deep medicine,
Well, and I'm going to take us back up out of the esoteric for a minute. One of the things you said that I think is a really great synopsis is fewer thoughts equals fewer problems. Yes, to being present for our kids and down-regulating and all that stuff. We can talk about that in a minute. But this idea that we all want to have fewer problems. We want to have an easier life as parents. How does the thought stuff play into this?
Oh my God.
Got an hour or 3 or 5?
Well, that's what we're interviewing him, right?
It's a great question, and it's utterly fundamental, and it's crazy how profound it is. And you can't really know it until you have the experience of coming into, say, a retreat or even a meditation sit, and oh my God, you've got all these issues. They're all so urgent. They have to be dealt with now, and your mind is telling you that story, and you get settled, and that quiets down, and there's no more urgency. And guess what? They turned out to not be that much of a problem anyway. And 9 out of 10 of them just sorted themselves out on their own. But you are keeping them going in this sort of state of kind of like frenetic anxiety in your own head, and you don't even realize I mean, maybe I'm sure people are self-aware in this podcast. You do realize it's obvious when you have a big, oppressive concern going on. Although even then, often we're walking around with that without even full awareness that that's happening. Almost more pervasive is underneath that. There's a kind of, I think of it as like the sound of the fridge in the kitchen. Like you're hanging out in the kitchen and the fridge is humming away and you don't even notice the fridge is humming away. And then it just goes off. And the silence is shocking and dramatic. And it makes you realize before there had been this background hum. And I think that's what a lot of our minds are like. Even when we think we're not working on a big problem, in the background, there's a kind of hum of agitated, pushing, pulling, planning, working out, not sure. And I've had experiences, many of them on retreats and just through sitting, where that cuts out and you realize there's no problem. I mean, really, truly, in the moment, there's no problem. And that is the refreshment of practice. Isn't to say that in the moment there aren't life problems in life or problems about, politics and problems with the environment. Of course, there are those, but to be able to reset your nervous system so it can have the experience of there not being a problem in the moment is so necessary. And the longer you can do that, the more capacity you have when you come back into those problems. So,
you're not saying there are no problems. What I think, what I want to be clear, what I'm hearing you saying is that when you can slow your brain down and yourself down to be present, to not have any problems in that moment, that nourishes your brain and your nervous system and your body and yourself and your being, so that you're better able to tolerate whatever else is happening in the outside world.
Absolutely. Better able to tolerate it and better able to respond intelligently to it, as opposed to responding to from inside your freak out, in which case you're just going to create waves of reactivity in every direction, which is what happens. So, I mean, I call it the no problem. It is an experience of the moment of knowing you're safe and you belong and you're connected and that things are okay as they are. And that is what creates that reset. And eventually, this is kind of paradoxical, you can, through practice, begin to carry that sense with you around to more and more of the world's problems. So it's not like you have to retreat to a cave to have that experience. You're able to be in front of a rather intense situation, which is an intensely problematic situation, say, like you're whatever it is, and you're able to keep a kind of sense of self-possession or poise in the middle of that comes from that kind of grounded presence. And it literally is the same thing. It's the no problem bubble that you start to carry around with you inside the problems. If this is making sense. This is my way of talking about it right now.
No, it makes huge sense. And I want to take a stab at the brain science, because if we're stressed or overwhelmed or agitated or whatever it is, our brain and our body sees that as something that has to get fixed. This is a problem. This is an emergency. The red light is going off.
Cortisol sloshing through the system, sluicing.
Exactly. And if we can notice that and figure out how to downregulate, still the situation might be a problem to be resolved, but we're going to do that from a very different place of consciousness, because it's not an emergency. It's a challenge to be addressed, but not an emergency. Is that
exactly? That's exactly right. And not only are you more capable of coming up with a grounded, reasonable solution based on the actual evidence of your senses versus the disaster scenario in your brain, there's also a kind of recognition that one moment at a time, the mind thinks it needs to solve all the problems all the way down the line, problem A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all the way to Z, and it imagines the chess moves necessary to do that. But you can't really know more than one or two steps down what's going to happen. So that's not really a good use of your energy, trying to game reality in that way. So there's a kind of quality of energy efficiency starts to come in where, okay, one step at a time, one breath at a time, one moment at a time. This is the next thing to do from this place of being more grounded and present. You can just see how from that place and that orientation, all things become more manageable.
Yeah, so many things are coming up, and what I want to do, if we can, is take a quick break, and then we'll come back, and we're going to let you guide us through practicing this a little bit, because to what Diane was calling out when I was hearing you saying that there's a lot of what we do in the world of neuro-informed coaching, this coach approach, that is a parallel, another vehicle way of helping parents find the presence you're describing. And so when you can map over a 2-minute moment that you're going to bring to us in a few minutes back into this way of being in the world that's about looking for being in the process of it instead of trying to fix it. The impact of that is profound. So let's take a quick break and then we'll be right back.
Do you recognize current ADHD interventions fall short? At Dig Coaching, we have developed a new field of engineering and a new ADHD intervention called Cognitive Ergonomics from the Inside Out. To learn more, visit cognitive-ergonomics.com.
Welcome back, everybody. Our guest is Jeff Warren, and we are talking about consciousness, mindfulness, meditation. We're talking about what happens when we give ourselves permission and a vehicle to calm down our nervous systems and what's available for us in our lives and for our families when we do that, really. So, Jeff, you had offered to take us through a little exercise. We're going to take you up on that.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I kind of specialize in trying to make meditation maximally accessible. And for that, I think the important thing, see, when you got problems, you think you need solutions, and you're going to go on the quest of learning more information about the things that you need. Well, what I'm going to offer is the opposite of that. It's kind of simplicity. And the first thing you need to do, even in like a 2-minute grounding practice that I'll do or a settling practice, is you kind of got to disarm the mind. So don't make this into a big deal. My invitation for people is we're about to do nothing here, truly nothing. So you can do nothing with your eyes open or closed. And you can just take a few kind of slow, deliberate breaths. And the framing I want to offer here is you're not entering some special meditative state, or you don't need to like focus on the breath or, any of that. I want you to kind of imagine instead that it's like you just found yourself in this little eddy of free time here. A bit like maybe you came home early from work and you're on your front porch or your fire escape, or you're on a park bench, and there's just this little window of a few minutes where you don't need to be anywhere else and you don't want to be anywhere else. And you're just sitting and being human and just breathing. You're sensing the body sitting or standing, if the case may be, or sitting if you're driving a car. Obviously, you're aware of your environment. Don't lose touch with that. But you're just letting yourself kind of be here unadorned. You don't need to get anything right or problem solve anything. It's about just sitting here being. And the mind will go, I don't know how to sit and be, or, oh, wait, this is it, or, well, I got to do this, this, and this, and that's okay. You kind of just smile and let that be part of the experience, because the mind has a certain amount of momentum. And you just go back to being. I mean, you can't not be. You already won this one. It's like you check that off. Existence, check. You exist. You're going to fall off out of existence if you don't secure yourself with the right strategy here. It's already a done deal. Just this pause and there's some kind of moving about this. It's like, yeah, you're allowed to just sit here and be as you are without having to prove yourself, even to your meditation teacher or to yourself. Just breathing. And I'll just encourage people, if hit pause on this podcast if you want to stay here for another few minutes, because it's medicine. Just this little bit of down regulating. And of course, for some people, there'll still be lots of chatter, and then it's about noticing that and being okay with that. But finding a place to drop that into your day, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes here and there. For me, it's indispensable. So welcome back to your life, to your existence. You didn't go anywhere, but here we are still.
Well,
as I was listening, let me just share real quickly. I remember that moment when I walked into my family room and my kids were all sitting there, and I was kind of looking around for something they needed to be doing. And,
right, totally.
Right, the kids were really young, and there was this moment of they should be doing something. And then I kind of went, wait a minute, they're just hanging out with each other. And that's okay.
Unstructured being, they call it in, I forget who, I think it was Winnicott or someone saying how important it was for kids to have just time for when there's no demand on their system to be doing. This is no different with adults.
Yeah.
We just don't give ourselves any time.
And there's two practical challenges with that. One is that our mind's not going to let us do that, right? It's
Right.
sort of,
Very.
of course, there's always
That would be
something that we
practical
need to
challenge
be
number one, or our kids.
for our kids. And then the other piece of it is that there is a practical aspect to this, right? And it's just sort of, we don't want to pretend that you aren't busy parents with kids who are maybe tugging at your sleeve feels like 24/7. And sometimes it's about going, okay, wait, I'm in the bathroom, the door is closed. If I take 2 minutes instead of
Very much.
4 minutes, what can I do? Or if I'm cooking dinner and they're watching whatever they're watching.
Whatever. Right.
Right. It's just sort of to be here. And it's what you're describing. It's really about dropping in under the thoughts. It's such a woo-woo phrase, but it's just sort of noticing that there's something there besides just your brain spinning. And
That's it.
I didn't say this earlier, but one of the things I noticed for myself is I tried to do some like walking mindfulness and just kind of awareness as I walk the street with my dog. And there is a song, and it's not always the same song, that constantly plays in the back of my head, but it's mostly when I'm walking. And it's the weirdest thing, but just that awareness that it's going to be there. And it's like, oh, wait, what's the song today? Is there some secret code in the lyrics that I need to pay attention to? Or is this just a pretty cool tune that I want to walk to today? Right. But it's that awareness that we aren't our thoughts and we can separate ourselves from that.
Exactly. And if you can notice the thought, then you're not totally embedded in the thought. You're not totally identified with it. And that's the big movement and practice over time. The more you do this in these just little 2-minute bits or 4 minutes or wherever you have a little bit of time, the more you're building the habit of space, you could say, in your system. And you stop taking those urgencies so seriously. But it's true. It's just practically very hard when you're a parent. So you have to just do it in little bits here and there where you can. I often do it with my kids, like not with them guiding them in it, but like I'll just do a little, because I have once in a while I'm able to be seated and quiet. I have a kind of memory of that's in my system. So I'll remember that, and I'll just kind of, what I like to do is just imagine almost like I'm a place. Like I don't have an agenda. I'm just this place. I'm this welcoming kind of safe space. And I imagine I'm a place. And it's the same vibe. It has the same quality of, I just sit and I just be. And as soon as I do that, I can notice my kids start to down regulate. And it's so underwhelming sounding. The big challenge with meditation is the cognitive mind thinks it already knows it all and is totally unimpressed with it. And because it has nothing to do with that, it has to do with this simplest little shift and valuing what that little shift is and learning to notice it more and more, and it builds out from there. But it will never compete with the flashy ideas of the mind. So it's that's why the practice part of it is so indispensable.
So I want to check in with both of you and check in on your time, Jeff, because there are a couple of more things we really wanted to talk about, and I think we might be able to extend this or do this in 2 episodes or something if you've got maybe 15 more minutes.
Yeah, I got 15 more minutes. Yeah.
Okay. Because it's not a surprise that it took 25 minutes to get it, because we needed the pause and the space to come into this space to be able to have some of the more intellectual part of the conversation that I think is also important. One of the things you said before we started talking, Diane, that you wanted to talk about was the connection between emotion and shame. And some of this work around mindfulness, the presence. And I want to bring that in here because it's so important for our community.
Well, and I think that it's the underbelly, right? So we're overwhelmed, we're frustrated, and there's an emotion that's in there that's causing the agitation, which is making our mind spin, or whatever order of operations you believe with those two things. And a big part of what goes on with the mind is attached to emotion. And I know shame is one, fear is one. We talk about catastrophizing a lot in our community. Parents are worried about our kids and their future and everything else. So maybe talk a little bit about the role that emotion plays in this cycle, Jeff.
Well, I mean, it's huge. It's kind of an amplifier. I mean, the framing in Buddhism that I really like, I'm sure many people may have heard of it. It's called the second arrow. You have the initial challenge or insult. Maybe you have a body discomfort, or you have this thing that happened. with somebody, there was a disconnect in some way, and then all of a sudden there's like the wave of secondary thoughts and ideas about it, and which then trigger emotions. For example, shame. Like you're with your kid, you get mad at your kid because they do something and you don't catch it fast enough, and you say that thing, and then afterwards this wave of shame, what a terrible parent you are, and that just long after the situation's over, that story is still going on in your brain, and there's literally a feedback loop between the feelings of, oh my God, this happened, and then the emotion of shame, and then the memories of things that's happened in the past, and then the more and more feelings. And so it just triggers this cascade. It goes on and on and on and on, and it makes everything much more challenging. And now you're much more quickly to get to a state of overwhelm or be in a state of reactivity from that place. So there's different ways to address that dynamic. I mean, I know you two talk a lot about it in your various offerings. That the classic meditation, classic mindfulness way is to interrupt that chain by just noticing it happen and to pay attention to one part. I had a teacher who used to say, when you're in a state of overwhelm or freak out like that, or a big emotional intensity, what happens is you have like an inner visual, what's going on. You have your inner talk, you have the thoughts, you have the emotional feeling of it, and they're all amplifying. It's like 10, 10, 10. It's like 10 times 10 times 10. They're all in this giant, huge load, whatever 10 times 10 times 10 is 1,000. But if you can just zoom in, kind of divide and conquer, and in those moments, just pay attention to one small part of this, just the inner talk that you're giving to yourself, or just one part of the sensation in your body, then you may have the same 10, 10, 10, but it's 10 plus 10 plus 10. They don't amplify together. It's the amplifying. I'm talking about subjective experience here. Inside subjective experience, when they all start amplifying together, that's when we get to those states of total like disaster situations. But if we can just focus on one part, we find out that actually we may be 10 out of 10 in our emotions, but that's manageable, one breath at a time. And then even from there, the more we do that, the more it kind of begins to downregulate, a little bit more space we can have. And of course, the move there is you're not trying to quash it, or when I say get space, I don't mean push it over here. There are techniques for that. I mean more, you let it be here. You have compassion, you're having this response, the self-compassion piece. You recognize it's a normal thing that happens to every human being. You breathe, you feel the emotion, and just from that place, that whole cascade can start to, you basically interrupt the cycle. But you have to have the wherewithal to do it. And if not in the exact moment, then as soon as you can, downstream. Sometimes I lose it, I missed it, then it's recover faster. I can then do this for myself later. Does that make sense?
No, it does. It does. And I think that the last thing you said is key for me, which is like, this stuff isn't easy. It's not like you should magically can go, oh, wait, I'm having an emotion. Let me downregulate, right? It's
exactly.
But the practice that you gave earlier, where you're just paying attention to what's going on in your brain and your body, makes it easier for when those moments hit and you get heightened to either catch it before it happens or catch it pretty quickly after it happens to go, oh, wait, I'm in that place again.
Exactly. And you get sensitized to it through practice. You start to notice early and earlier kind of early warning signals. You start to notice what the beginnings of feeling overwhelmed is like, or the beginnings of getting really, you know what your hot spot. So you have much more awareness around that, so you can back off as needed. And as you say, I'm kind of providing an ideal overview. Real life is messy, but these tools are indispensable. I mean, everyone's doing this anyway. It's like you're doing your best to do this anyway, and mostly just screwing it up, or at least I am. This is just about making it more conscious so you can apply it, with more deliberateness.
But what we like to say very often, especially when we're talking about emotional dysregulation, emotionality, is the goal is to reduce the intensity and the frequency. It's not about eliminating it, because we're humans having emotions. The goal is to minimize the ways in which they make us feel like they're impossible, and to make them feel more possible to be with.
Exactly. But I guess just to say again, like, it's so hard, but because when you're a busy parent, you're a busy parent. But if you're only ever just trying to apply it in the moment when things are absolutely out of control, it's going to be really, really, really hard to do. That's why if you can find during times that aren't emergencies, you can find 10 minutes to do a seated practice. Like I started getting up, at 6:30 before my kids wake up, before everyone else wake up, just so I can do 20 minutes of sitting and I can connect to that kind of grounded sanity and presence. And then because I've done that, it's so much easier for me to find that in the day, versus to decide, oh, I need to be able to find my inner Buddha while my kid is throwing yogurt at my face,
Right.
which happens almost every
Well,
day.
and that's a great segue because the other thing I really want to talk just for a minute about, Jeff, is our kids and teaching some of these practices and modeling some of these practices for our kids, because a lot of you are listening who have kids with big, giant emotions, and that's really your challenge. And I know we talk a lot about helping your kids with big emotions in our programming, and a key part of that is knowing what tools for what time, right? It's this sort of, if you've got a kid in a full-on meltdown, you're going to handle it you aren't going to tell them to have a few deep breaths because they might throw their yogurt at you. But the question is, how do we begin to model this, practice this, integrate this kind of in our family life, so we can
With complex
teach our
kids.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I know the two of you know a lot more about this than I do, but I'll just say what I do, which is when there's when my kid is having, my eldest kid in particular is having a big blowout, I stay right there and I go, all right. I'm like, I know you're so mad. I get mad too. And then we'll go down and I'll start beating the ground. Boom, 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 boom. Or I basically try to normalize that these feelings are happening. I get him to talk about it. I get him to, he can scream and rant, but I show him that I have this too, and I'm gonna act it out. Or what we used to do, and we still do, is I have this book of like drawings that we do, and we start to draw our feelings. Like, I'm feeling so mad, and I'll go round and round in a circle, and he'll start scribbling his thing, and just to let it come out in this sort of more cathartic way. And 9 out of 10 times, some version of that ends up. It's like he's allowed to have his blowout, and then the momentum of this other activity kind of catches it. He sees that I'm doing it too, and I'm saying, when I feel like this, I do this, and I'm talking about how I'm describing, noticing how I'm feeling, and what I'm doing to kind of like express the energy of that. And it can almost always, after a bit, he will come down, and then I can sit in front of him and look him in the eye and just be like, oh boy, that was a lot, and just ran from a more regulated place, regulate him. And then when I'm too triggered to do that, I trade off with my partner, and then I come back in, because sometimes I have a very intense nervous system myself, so sometimes I just need to check out for a couple minutes or even 30 seconds. Like, okay, and it's amazing to me. I go away for 30 seconds, and it's like, oh, it's totally different now. I thought it was.
Got it.
The whole world was terrible when I was right there with him, because whatever he was feeling, I was feeling. And then I just got 30 seconds away, and I'm like, oh, what was that about? It was like I got caught up in this 5-year-old hurricane.
Well, and what you're describing is this kind of sponge-like quality that we have in our relationships, right?
Yes.
Like, we feel them, they feel us, and it doesn't even always have to be verbal. There's this way in which if we're dysregulated, they feel that. And if they're dysregulated, we feel it.
Well, and you use the word caught up in, right? It's this sort of, they dysregulated, they maybe are on the attack, they're attacking us and calling us names or being physical or whatever it is. And so then we are taking it personally and we're escalating, and we end up in the hot mess. And it
Absolutely
described is like, you notice your kids having a meltdown. It's like, oh, it's no different. Like, I have a new grandbaby, and it's like, oh, they need to have a diaper change. Oh, my kid's having a meltdown. I mean, it's just that same sort of energy of matter-of-factness.
And if you're having a big reaction to it, it's really useful I found it really useful to go, okay, why am I so outraged by this situation? Like, he's freaking out. What in me is freaking out right now? Or he's so angry. What in me is angry right now? It's almost always he's reflecting me, I'm reflecting him. However intolerable he is being on the outside, I feel that way on the inside. And so I try to turn around like, hey, well, what's angry in me right now? And it's like, oh yeah, there is this. And it was the thing that was there before he got angry. It's like, or there's this irritability or this forcing or this strictness or this judginess or this harshness or whatever it is, something I had inside me that I didn't even know I had, that he's responding to. So to be able to direct it inward, have more awareness yourself, see it, then you're no longer in the grip of it. And then he's no longer in the grip of it, or they're no longer in the grip of it, or at least as much. So it really is, the answer is very much awareness. What else would it be?
Yeah. We could talk for hours, and I'm going to have to call the conversation, which makes me very sad because I have so many other thoughts, and maybe can convince you to come back and pick it up and continue because I have lots of other things I'd like to talk about. I'm sure you would too, Diane. But before we kind of close the conversation, those of you who are listening may want to find out more about how you can learn from Jeff, follow Jeff. You can find him at homebasewithjeff.com on Substack. You can find him at jeffwarren.org. And his podcast is mindbodpod.com. So all of that will be in the show notes. Plenty of ways to access him and find more and learn more and be more with this beautiful presence of this human being that we are enjoying so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Before we wrap, is there something we haven't talked about that you want to make sure we address or highlight or hit? Or is there something you have mentioned that you want to kind of double click on before we close?
Well, maybe I'll just say, different practices, different strokes work for different folks. And I'm a big believer in practice literacy, that to be that's my podcast, the Mind Bod Adventure Pod, I do with Tasha. It's all about, we take different kinds of practices for a ride and we take the listeners with us and to see what's going to work for what kinds of people and what kinds of situations. And so there's no one size fits all answer, particularly when you're dealing with neurodivergent folks, of which I am one, and neurodivergent kids, So I think just like getting curious, like my motto that I have a retreat, it's called Being Human Takes Practice. Like all of this, it's like, and then I say take practice, I don't mean in a worky way, like, oh, it's just like eat your vegetables. I mean, there's a fun exploration in life of getting to figure out there's a huge amount of plasticity in how we are, and that certain practices can support us, can heal us, can change us. And we get to explore that. And I think just being open to different therapeutic modalities, different kinds of styles of meditation, different movement things, and figure out what clicks for you is super valuable. And also, I guarantee there's already things that click for you. There are certain things you do to regulate that are already practices, but you don't really honor them as that. Or you think, oh, I got to go take a bath or I got to have a nap. It's just this guilty thing I do. But I would say back up from that, existentially underline it, protect it, call it a practice, honor it for what it is as one of your, go-to ways of getting through this thing. And, to me, practice is really the answer. You don't get to be born and just coast. There's a element of learning to be deliberate about how to take care of ourselves and others that's, can be very joyful if we approach it with the right attitude, and it's some work, but,
And bring
I
it
like
on.
the idea of being able to label my Saturday afternoon nap a practice. I think that might be. So, Jeff, before we close, is there a favorite quote or a motto that you'd like to share with our audience?
Being Human Takes Practice is one. I have the Do Nothing project I do on Sunday night. It's just about the medicine of doing nothing. Wherever you can, find ways to do nothing, do less, even do nothing. See if you can enjoy the defiance, the juvenile defiance in choosing to do nothing with a moment here and there. And those would be my mottos.
I love that.
I love that.
Yeah. Jeff,
That's
thank
beautiful.
you so much for being here with us today.
Awesome to be here. Thanks, Diane. Thanks, Elaine.
It has been a true pleasure. To those of you listening, take a moment and ask yourself, what's your insight from today? What are you taking away from this conversation that you want to bring forward with you into your life? Very often we latch on to what we've heard in the last moments. So, being human takes practice. Maybe that's what it is. But think about what in this whole conversation, as we were talking about the essence of co-regulation and how our thoughts play in and the no problem. Like, what are you taking away from today that you want to really bring forward with you into your life?
And as always, thanks to you for what you're doing for yourself and for your kids. At the end of the day, you make a difference.
Take care, everybody. Have a great week.
You've been listening to the Parenting with Impact podcast with Elaine and Diane. For more information on the Impact Parents community or to join Sanity School for Parents, please visit impactparents.com. If you like what you've heard, please share this podcast with friends who need similar guidance and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.